Let us offer our consecration to the Lord. Lord, we offer up to you this day, and we ask that your name be glorified as we finish this 15th week of Ordinary Time and start going into the weekend of the 16th week of Ordinary Time. Let your name be glorified and praised in all that we do, and we ask this through Christ our Lord. Well, now our first reading skips over to the 12th chapter, so pretty much all of the plagues that we understand is part of the Exodus story. We've skipped over that as the sequence of first reading continues. And now we go right into Passover. And so this becomes the pièce de résistance of what ultimately is God's freeing of the Egyptian people. And so this becomes the beginning of Passover. Now, one of the interesting things is, first of all, I would highly recommend, as I always do, Dennis Prager's Rational Bible series, because one of the things he brings out in that book is that all the plagues that we know that are part of the story of the Ten Commandments, each one of those plagues represents a god that the Egyptians have worshipped. And so this becomes a powerful moment where God is showing the Egyptians that he is more powerful than their gods. Now, according to Dennis Prager, the strongest, the most important god of the Egyptians was represented as a lamb. So you can see where this is going. So now we have Passover. And of course, we know the instruction. This is where God is going to free his people from the oppression of the Egyptians, and we know what's going to happen. And so the Egyptians, or rather the Hebrews, are taught to sacrifice a lamb and take the blood of the lamb and put it over their doorpost. Now we have something that is similar that's part of Catholic teaching today, and that is on Epiphany, we write the date and the initials for the wise men, for the Magi. And so if you've seen that symbol, and we've done that in the church, you write the date, and you do it over in your houses too, and you write the symbol, these initials, and the date is like for next year it'll be 20, and then the three initials with a dash in between them, and then 24. So you have Balthazar, Gaspar, and Melchior. So you would put 20-B-M-G-24 over your doorpost, over your doorpost there. Right over the top, where the top of the door is as you walk in. And that is a reminder of that, the incarnation of the Lord, but it draws itself all the way back to Passover. So here we're looking at something that is roughly 3,000 years ago. No, actually, is it, roughly, is it, we'll talk about 3,000, roughly, that would be yeah. All right, because one of the things we have to put in the middle of this is, let's stop that for a second, and I can look up the time, but you got to realize we have Moses, but then we have to go through not only the 40 plus years of Moses, but then we have to go through the period of the judges, then we have to go to the kings, to the king that begins with Saul, and then number 2 is David, and David becomes the ultimate sign of the king of Israel, and it's in the house of David that Jesus is born. But then we go through David, and then we go through the kingdom that follows David. Then it splits up into 2 kingdoms, and during this time, from actually Saul through David, you go from the judges to the time of the prophets. And the prophets lead us all the way up to, pretty much through the Old Testament. The ultimate prophet in the Old Testament is St. John the Baptist. But your date-wise, you're going to go all the way up through to the time of the Maccabees. And then we enter into the time of Jesus. We get St. John the Baptist. But I want us to go back. So we've got Moses. here at the beginning of this very powerful period, but we still have to go through the Judges, through King Saul, and then David before we enter in, and then Solomon, and then we start going into the time that ultimately will become the powerful time of the prophets. That starts roughly, it's really in its heyday, beginning roughly in the 8th century BC, and also part of the 9th century BC. So you can see how long ago that is. So when we're talking Moses, we're going back to roughly the 14th century BC. So you can see how far back we're going. We've got quite a distance, yet things that are happening there are still affected what we do now. And this is that time where we set up the Passover. And of course, the Passover becomes basically the template that leads to the Last Supper. So you can see how this is connected well over 3,000 years. We'll be right back right after this. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. And don't forget our website, CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can also hear the radio show through our parish website at stanthonyalston.org. That's stanthonyalston.org. So we're talking about this powerful message. We're talking about this powerful reality and how we connect it, go back 1,300 years. So, no, go back, I'm sorry. There's the 2,000 years up until Jesus, and then an additional 1,300 years, so well over 3,000 years ago. So now we see this instruction there about the Passover, and this is leading people to be freed ultimately from the Egyptians. Now, one of the things that we realize is, you might say, well, all of that is well past. Well, actually not, because a lot of any kind of theology that talks about liberation, including liberation theology, roots itself back to the freedom experienced by the Jews, well, the Hebrews at the time, as they are freed from Egypt. And that's a major center of a lot of freedom and theology. And another center, which happens in the Brazilian community, is as this continues, when they enter into the Promised Land, the whole story of Joshua and the Battle of Jericho. But we're going to look at that later. But we see that all of this connects back to this liberation of the Hebrews from the Egyptians. But as I learned from in my seminary class, where I had to take a class on I had to take a couple classes on liberation theology because it's so strongly rooted in some parts of the world, and liberation theology in its most materialistic form, which is a form that the Vatican steers us away from, is freeing people from economic oppression, which is an issue. I mean, clearly that's an issue. And so what the idea is to focus on this story of liberation and calling people to be freed from economic oppression. Now, what is economic oppression? It's when you have people living in a society where you have them living and they're very, very poor, and they have no way of getting out of their poverty. Meanwhile, you have others that are very, very rich. And liberation theology, that's looked upon as economic oppression. So I'm not a liberation theologian. I'm not pushing liberation theology. I'm just pushing this idea that you can understand it, because a lot of liberation theology roots itself back to the story of being liberated from Egypt. So that's an important concept that we want to understand, but we need to understand what the prime liberation is from. And the prime liberation is from sin because the prime oppression is from sin. So we look at this freedom that the Hebrews experience in the Passover that becomes the template for the Mass and the recognition of Jesus' death and resurrection that frees us from sin. We look at all of that as the ultimate liberation is the liberation from sin. So always keep that in mind. And that's what Jesus came to liberate us from. Now, I think I've told you the story before, but I'll tell you again. I'm very much into that idea, the prime liberation from sin. And when I was in the seminary, I learned liberation theology from a priest who was very much into liberation theology. And wonderful guy, he died in Peru, serving the people there. But I remember saying, but no, what our role is to convert people. And he said, you were in the Philippines. Do you think you could have converted Ferdinand Marcos? And I said, no, you couldn't. And he says, that's our point. And that's an important distinction. But remember, what the church teaches is the prime liberation is liberation from sin, which may lead to oppression, but that's the prime oppression, is sin. We'll talk more on Monday. Have a blessed day. I want to call your attention to Catholic TV, which offers great faith-filled, family-friendly programming 24 hours a day. You can find your cable channel at www.getcatholictv.com, and you can watch online on the free apps or check out the YouTube channel. Daily Mass, Rosaries, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Novena are all available online and on demand. Check out CatholicTV.com. If you would like to support our program, please consider a donation to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. There are several ways to consider this. One is to purchase any of our merchandise, which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. There are coffee mugs there. There's also my latest book, Encounter Christ in Your Humanity, all of which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can also donate to the show directly through either the Donate tab, also at CatholicAudiomedia.com, or by sending a donation through the U.S. Postal Service with your questions and comments at 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. That's St. Anthony Parish, 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. Finally, the best way you can support our parish is to attend Mass on Sundays at 10 o'clock and be a part of our parish. We thank you for any support you would like to give to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts, the sponsoring parish for this media outreach to Catholics and other Christians in the WROL, WEZE, and podcast listening audience. In Cristo vivimos.